My name is Uzee Brown. I'm chairman of the Division of Visual and Performing Arts at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, where I've been involved in education for 45 years between that and a couple of other institutions. And I am past president of the National Association of Negro Musicians, which is the oldest organization in the country for professional African American musicians. And it is very ironic, at the time of this dialogue, I'm actually at the conference of the National Association of Negro Musicians, whose first scholarship recipient was Marian Anderson. And this is the year of the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the National Association of Negro Musicians. And what is so delightful about this experience is that there are many people whom I am encountering on a daily basis who were so intricately involved with the first of the legacy series for the National Opera Association in 1995 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I have the pleasure of running into people who not only sang, but were presented in workshops and who were also accompanists. I'm delighted that one of the persons with whom I sang in the very last operatic selection in that particular legacy concert was Dr. Louise Toppin, who happens to be performing at this conference in a new work to celebrate this 100th. It's so important to remember that in the legacy and the annals of history of opera in America and throughout the world, it has been a challenge for African Americans to find their footing. And that has been the result of many things that are less associated with their talent than it is opportunity. And what this Cambridge, Massachusetts experience represented in 1995 was an opportunity to show that broad and tremendous talents in a variety of repertoire and vocal fox, in a variety of languages of African Americans who for decades and decades have been involved in the performance of operatic repertoire. I was so honored because there were people whose names I had heard, whom I never had the opportunity to make, and so I felt myself in very good company, including those who were being honored at that particular occasion. George Shirley was certainly one of the primary hosts, but those four people who were being honored, I later had very positive affiliations with, and they were Camilla Williams, Todd Duncan, Matawilda Dobbs, and Robert McFerrin. I was fortunate to have sung for the 90th birthday celebration of Matawilda Dobbs in Atlanta, Georgia, just a few years back before her passing. And one of the last students of Todd Duncan was a student of mine who had graduated from Morehouse. I am so appreciative to Dr. Gail Robinson Turu for having invited us to be a part of this. I feel that it is not only a legacy for the National Opera Association, but it adds to the legacy of experience that I've had associated with African Americans who are involved in not only classical music performance, but the performance of repertoire by African Americans. And I want to point out that one of the things that was done at this conference in Cambridge was a workshop that included excerpts from operatic works composed by African Americans. I remember very distinctly singing with Laura English Robinson a duet from one of William Grant Still's operas, Highway 1. And also at the piano was a person who is at this current conference where I'm attending, Cliff Jackson, who accompanied also in the final selection of that concert in Cambridge. The reason I think it is important for us to have been involved in this is because it speaks to the idea of inclusiveness, where many organizations unfortunately have not made room for people of color who've been involved in these activities, including operatic performance, the performance of what one would consider art music, the idea that we can sing and sing with all of the nuance and the correctness and so forth, the music that is born out of the Western European tradition. And I just have a great deal of passion for what the organization has done in terms of nurturing that dimension of the African American engagement in operatic performance. Gail mentioned earlier the importance of student engagement in these kinds of activities. It's very ironic that I had founded, along with some friends of mine, an operatic repertory company in Atlanta, Georgia, that was only 6 years old when we attended the Cambridge Conference. And I went back so energized as a result because of the fact that it represented a kind of hope in an area where we had not had the experience of being able to do this kind of music before. Of course, there were other operatic repertory companies. I'm thinking now of Wayne and Ben Matthews in New York, who had begun a company, and there was one in Mississippi that had been begun by nuns. I'm not recalling the name now, but too few where opportunities were made for African Americans, especially as a training ground for young students. Where do they have the opportunity to test their wares? How many times are they given the opportunity to stand on a stage and to do the work behind the stages with set design, with direction, with all of the aspects? You know, there are 17 unions that generally are more involved in a full production. And all of those experiences require having the opportunity to step in the door and to make our presence known. So I think it's a very valuable thing that happened with the legacy experience of National Opera Association. I was very happy to be a part of that. On a final note, I would say that those people who were engaged in the founding of this, people who I've respected all of my life. Mr. Shirley I first saw in a concert in 1973 in Toledo, Ohio. And I was so honored to have been there because it was my first time experiencing the singing of an African-American tenor who was an international star and had appeared as a protagonist in opera. And I was apprehensive about approaching him, and he was such a wonderful and accessible and encouraging man. That has never changed in terms of who George Shirley is. And I still call him Mr. Shirley out of respect, in spite of the fact that I've known him now for over 40 years. I can say readily that his inspiration continues to be something that is important, because with all of the years of his experience and with all of the tremendous acumen in terms of his career, he is a gentleman of the first rank and file and so accessible. And I have just recently watched him in a master class. He has not lost any of those things that has brought the magic to his career as both performer and vocal pedagogue.